Hello, my name is Skatchy. This is my IMAPs and DNS server security. This is course name Systems Security Cyber, and for instructor James due March 1st, 2023, and I'll begin. So the presentation objectives. So I'm going to explain the IMAPs and IMAPs protocols and configuration using Dovecot. I'm going to explain DNS protocol and configuration on Windows and Linux server. I'm going to demonstrate lab-based service validation with Nmap. I'm going to provide hardening recommendations for all services. So I'm going to provide hardening recommendation for the IMAP's protocol and configuration. I'm going to provide hardening recommendations for the DNS protocol and configuration on Windows and Linux, and I'm going to provide hardening recommendations to demonstrate lab-based services validation with Nmap. So um so Iron AP's technical role. So the full meaning of IMAPS is Internet Message Access Protocol Secure. So its default port is TCP port 993. That's the port it uses, port 993, and then it uses SSL/TLS encryption. So the type of encryption it uses is the SSL/TLS encryption. It secures email retrieval protocol. So email retrieval can be secure using the IMAPS, and it protects authentication, credentials, and mailbox data. So authentication process and credentials is protected using the IMAPS. That's the Internet Message Access Protocol Secure. So IMAP, which is the port 143. This is the comparison between IMAP and IMAPS. So starting with the IMAP, which is the port 143, it's unencrypted by default. So it's not unencrypted. So if you wanna, it's not encrypted. Sorry. So if you want to make it encrypted, you're gonna have to do that by yourself. Then it's vulnerable to packet sniffing. So it's a threat. It's actually vulnerable to packet sniffing. And then for the IMAPS, which is the default port 993, is encrypted using SSL/TLS, and then it protects against interception and MITM attacks. So this basically shows us that the IMAPS is always better to use because it protects us against interception and MITM attacks, and it's encrypted using TLS, unlike the IMAP, which is the port 143, which is not encrypted and is vulnerable to packet sniffing. So IMAPS on Ubuntu Devo, I'm going to tell you the installation, the command for installation. I'm going to tell you the command for configuration, and I'm going to say the command for validation. So to first start with installation, the command for Dovecot is sudo apt install Dovecot dash imapd, which is the installation. Then to configure, you have to enable SSL in 10-ssl.config. Then you configure certificate and private key. Then the validation, you use Nmap. This is for the the Windows. So you use Nmap dash S capital T dash P 993, which is the port, and then you put in the server IP. This is how you this that's how you see that's how you say it. So the IMAPS hardening recommendations. So number one, you enforce TLS 1.2 or higher. That's one hardening recommendation. Then two, you disable plain text authentication. Three, you restrict file permissions on SSL keys. And then four, you disable unused protocols. So disabling unused protocols can also help in. That's also a recommendation I recommend, because disabling protocols that are not being used will be a good recommendation for IMAPS. And then you disable plain text authentication and you enforce TLS 1.2 higher, since it comes in encrypted already. So enforcing TLS and keeping it up to date is also a recommendation. So the DNS, that's technical role. So DNS also stands means domain name system. This resolves domain name to IP addresses. Then the default port is UDP 53 and TCP 53 is essential infrastructure service. So this is just the technical role of the domain name system. So domain name domain name system DNS on Windows Server, that's non-DC. So install DNS server role. You have to create how. So to install this, you have to create primary forward lookup zone, and then two, you have to add a record for lab testing. So validating this on the Kali, like Linux, on the Kali, you have to use mmap/s capital U space slash p53, and then the Windows IP address to validate this on the Kali Linux. So Windows DNS hardening. So one, I would recommend disabling zone transfers. Two, I recommend disable resorption if it's not needed. Then three, I recommend restricting query access, and then four, I would recommend applying regular Windows updates. So regular Windows updates in, will help because keeping an outdated stuff um can be what do you call this, can be a means for threat, can be a means for vulnerability, can be a risk. So I recommend regular updates. And then so the DNS on Linux and Kali. So I'm going to give you the command to use. So the installation, you use sudo apt install bind9. So that's how to install it. Then to configure it, you have to configure the name.config.local, and then you have to create a db zone file. So once you're done configuring, that's it. That should that should be installed and up and running on your Ubuntu. And then for Kali, to validate it to see if it's really working, you have to use mmap dash s capital U dash p53, the Linux IP address. So this will show if it's working on the Kali or not. Then bind hardening recommendation. Number one, I'll recommend disabling resorption for external clients. Then two, I'll recommend restrict zone transfers. And then three, I'll recommend enabling DNSSEC validation. And then four, I'll recommend running bind in restricted environments. So these are my four hardening recommendations for the bind. So lab server configuration assignment. So on Ubuntu server, they've caught IMAPS, which is port 993. On the Windows server, DNS role, which is port 53, and then the Kali or Ubuntu, which is the bind DNS port 53. So this is my lab configuration assignment. This is what I am going to do to ensure that this the lab is configured and is working. Then so service validation using nmap. So on the for the IMAPS scan is going to be nmap space dash small t capital letter small s capital letter t space dash p, then the 993, which is the nmap port, and then the IP address comes after the port number. Then the DNS scan is used to either two. So you either use mmap sup53, which is the DNS port and then the IP, or you use mmap stp53, which is the port number and then the IP address. So you confirm open state in results. So my references. So these are my references that are given Dave code documentation with the link, ISC bind administrator guide with the link, Microsoft DNS server documentation with the link, mmap reference guide, HTTPS nmap with the link. So this is my presentation for today's assignment. Thank you.